Let's just start with the title, When David Meets Goliath. I won't address it directly. Hopefully we'll build a little bit of mystery during the conversation, but my goal is to, if not change your minds, at least make everybody think about what post-Gen AI society looks for translators. And a little bit about me so that we can contextualize why I'm here and why I really want to make sure that I try to connect with each and every one of you. So my name is Gabriel Fairman. I'm the founder and CEO of BureauWorks. We're a translation technology company headquartered in Lafayette, California. So we build translation management systems for large enterprises as well as agencies, but we have users such as Uber, Zendesk, Harley-Davidson, Scaled Agile, Automation Anywhere, so very large global companies use our software in order to get to their end users, as well as large agencies, amazing agencies like We Are Very, who's here today. And for those of you who don't know, my mother was a translator, so I grew up watching her first type in her typewriter, and then I watched her buy her Toshiba around some early 1990s and start migrating to a computer, and I saw her have a really hard time with cat tools and really not liking them. And I've always had great admiration for the arts that it means to be a translator. I don't take it lightly. I think it's one of the most undervalued professions in the world. I think that there is immense intellectual prowess in being a translator. I think it's tremendously underappreciated, particularly by translation buyers. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to change that, particularly with Gen AI. So one thing I do want to emphasize is that I understand that there's a great deal of fear and misconceptions around what AI is, what it isn't, and hopefully that's what we're going to address today. And I think as we clear out a little bit of those misconceptions and fears, maybe I'll be able to present a scenario that is, in fact, a little bit positive moving forward. And by the way, I do want to welcome any questions throughout. I'm not here because I just love to hear myself talk. I really want to hear all of you, so feel free to raise your hand. I'll stop. I want to entertain as many questions as possible. I don't have a very clear agenda other than connecting with each and every one here, devoting their time to me, so I'm very grateful for that. So just a little bit of context on where we are on our AI journey. And the reason why I brought this up, that takes us up all the way to the year 2070, where I'm no longer going to be in planet Earth, is just to contextualize that we are in the very beginning of a very, very long journey. The transition that we're going into is from a machine learning perspective. We first were in the age of data, right? And data is, just to describe what data is uncategorized, unfiltered information, right? So think about just like a soup of words. That's data, right? Information is organized data. So the more information becomes organized, the better the information. That's the theory of information. If it gets really well organized with layers of organization, you move into knowledge. That's kind of where we are now as far as AI systems and machine learning. The idea, when we talk about artificial general intelligence and things like that, is we'll be able to head in towards a world of wisdom, which I don't think may be necessarily compatible with the human race, but that's the idea behind machine learning engineering, right? But again, the key point about this slide is that we're just getting started. So wherever people think they are as far as technological adoption, evolution of technology, things are going to get a lot more sophisticated, and there will be time, right? And I think that's the key thing, is there will be a lot of time for everybody to adapt as long as we're moving. And that's part of what I want to emphasize today as well. So where are we right now in terms of translations and machine learning, right? And what does this number mean? So we did a study on 40 million segments using what we call context sensitivity, which is our best version of AI in translation. And this I'll explain how this mechanism works, but basically what this number means is that on average, in 20 languages that we studied, humans are changing, and by humans I mean professional, accredited human translators, delivering enterprise-grade translations, right? So this isn't done in some lab. This isn't done for just a particular kind of content. This is about marketing content. This is about websites. This is about Fortune 500 companies. This is about real content getting published, vetted by vetted professional translators, getting, on average, 11.17% changes to the suggestion that the translator is receiving in our tool, right? So when you think about that, it's a pretty scary number. More scary than the number itself is the direction of this number. This number is going down quarter by quarter. So it's not a crazy projection to believe that this number is going to be ridiculously close to zero at some point. But that's not a threat, and that's part of what I want to emphasize so much today. But if we take a look at certain languages, like English into Latin American Spanish, is at 5.5%. So it differs in language pairs, right? We're going to see higher edit distances maybe in English into Chinese or in English into other languages. But the point here I want to emphasize is that we're getting to a place where the suggestions are going to emulate very closely how human translators think and work, but that's not a problem, and I'll explain why. Before I move on, any questions about edit distance, how they're calculated? Yes, please.
Yeah, just one question. This number reflects how much editing was done by a human translator. It does not reflect the quality of the output.
Correct. But the quality of the output is given in the sense that this is content that's being published by Fortune 500 companies. So whether they're doing a terrible job, maybe, but this is the fact that this is customer-facing program translations from everything from insurance to medical research to marketing briefs. So this is high-end content being translated. We're not talking about support material. We're talking about customer-facing, high-exposure content, right? And yes, quality is a presupposition. Yes, please.
How do you measure edit distance?
Yeah, great question. So edit distance is measured by, and I'm going to simplify, but it's the number of additions, omissions, deletions, or insertion or movements in a given sentence. So if you have a sentence, for instance, with 10 words, and you add a word, for instance, you're going to have one change over 10. So that's an edit distance of 10%. If you insert two changes, that's an edit distance of 20%. And I'm simplifying because there are differences, characters are taken into account, it gets a little bit more complex, but simplifying, it's additions, changes, or deletions to the sentence structure. Yes, please.
So just, again, to make sure I'm understanding this
Yeah.
part. So the first column, you're saying every language needed every word changed with no one?
Yeah, the baseline is a human translating by themselves, right, without any machine suggestion. And this second column here is where we were with neural machine translation, such as DeepL, Google, AWS averages. So there's already a dramatic drop in a lot of these languages. They're already low, they're getting lower. And I guess the point that I want to illustrate with this is the direction is getting lower. Yes, please.
Sorry, the third and fourth columns,
Yeah.
are those meant to be percentages, like we should be multiplying those by 100?
So it's the coefficient of how much it became more effective by. So 14% compared to 20% is 31% more effective.
Yeah, but like, what's the unit of? Are those? Is the top one like 0.207%, or is it 20.7%?
20.7%.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And I get that it's kind of weird. You can express edit distance both as a percentage and as a decimal. In the industry, people use a lot the percentage, but yeah. So, and just explaining the mechanism that makes this happen, right? So we're talking about humans working with machine translation, glossary translation memories, where a large language model isn't translating at all. The large language model is working as a content arbitrator. I'll explain how that works in the next slide. But the important part is that we're talking about an interface where the engine is learning instantly from the translator. And that has incredible impact on the weight and the value of the work of a translator. And the other thing that's happening here is once we move into the LLM scenario, we're able to work semantically. And this, I can't emphasize enough the difference that this makes. So when we're working with translation memories and glossaries, for instance, we're working in what we call a syntactical paradigm. And with syntax is, the best way I can explain is, syntax is dumb, right? In the sense that syntax cannot have any idea of meaning. So very different things, very similar things, if they're written differently, you can't infer that they're the same. Like supermarket and store, right? Very similar concepts. From a syntactical perspective, there's absolutely no bearing one in the other. From a semantical perspective, they're very similar places. And if you look at tokens and vectors, that's basically what they're saying, right? A vector for a supermarket is a place where you buy things. Vector for a store is another place where you buy things. So there is a semantic similarity there. And again, I guess the real point I just want to emphasize, and nobody has to try to understand this, but I just want to explain that whatever everybody thinks that's going on with machine translation, I can guarantee is different than is actually going on. And if we look at like the paradigm that we're working with, this paradigm has machine translation as just one tiny little bit of information that's being used in a much larger framework to generate suggestions, right? And when we say CS Translator, this is a RAG translation model that's being used to try, the goal here is to try to emulate how we think as humans, right? And as translators, for instance, at least myself, I'm able to put many different hats according to the kind of content that I'm translating. I'm not always translating with the same voice, with the same tone, with the same awareness. And this is all about trying to create a framework that takes into account, including, for instance, persona profiles, including, for instance, the fact that we are always even thinking differently about the same things, right? And again, I don't want to be like crazily technical over here. Just want to show you that we're talking about systems that can understand the framework that we're working with at a very deep level and generate insights, learn from us dynamically, and dialogue, right? So that's the key thing, right? We're used to machine translation being a one-way street, and it's typically sometimes okay, a lot of times garbage, but it doesn't listen to us, right? We receive the feed. Sometimes if we get something that's machine translated, I have to change things in the file, sometimes hundreds of times. It's not learning from me. It's a dead kind of document. We're talking about a world where the text is living. It's interacting with us as we're working with it. And so we're talking about not anymore of the concept of machine translation post-editing. We're talking about the concept of literally entering into a dialogue with the text, which is a very different way of approaching translations. And I'm going to move on to markets and buyer camps. But before I do, any questions about the overall like direction of technology? Because that's all I wanted to establish, is that we're going into a place that's different than what most people have seen before as far as machine translation. Oh, good. Okay, so this is how I currently see buyer camps divided. By what I currently see, this is based on actual use cases, based on what I see small, medium, and large companies doing in their strategy with us. Lots of buyers are going this direction. I don't need translators. And that's not a big problem. It seems like it's a big problem, but I'll show why it's not. And the reason why they're thinking this is they're typically companies that are very tech forward, very focused on costs, and very unaware of how important it is to connect with people. And they go down this direction. And another thing that's important to mention is that a lot of companies maybe will start down this direction, but they'll change their minds because they'll see that there's something missing to their brand flavor, to how they connect with people. And then other camps are going to, okay, I need translators, and they're branching out into, again, another bifurcation. Some of them are thinking that they need translators who work on their own. Some of them are thinking, okay, I need Gen AI powered translators. And what we're seeing is more and more companies going into that camp. And there's a reason for that, right? When we think about the difference in productivity, the difference in efficiency, the difference in quality, it used to be that machine translation post-editing was a little bit better than garbage. And that's just the way it was, right? And I understand if everybody here has a terrible impression with machine translation, I totally get it, because I do too. But we're talking about a different way of interacting with text. We're talking about a way that actually allows a translator to produce 2-3 times more words with actually more quality, which was what you were asking about. But we'll get into that and how that works. Now, there's something also that's happening, is that language accessibility will become infinitely greater and translations will become infinitely more pervasive. So when we study content, we do content mapping with large enterprises, we realize that on average, enterprises translate only 10% of the content that they would like to translate. 10% of the content. And not only that, but they translate into very few languages. They pick and choose languages because translation for large companies is ridiculously expensive. We're talking about companies that are spending literally millions and millions of dollars a year getting their content translated. As translations become more accessible to them, they will add more languages and they will translate more content. So whatever we think that's the current translation pie of content, like let's say we're currently translating, just for example, 1 trillion words per year. It's likely that we're going to translate 100 trillion words per year. Because every time something gets translated, there's an opportunity for someone new to discover that product. There's an opportunity for someone new to discover that knowledge. There's an opportunity for greater accessibility, right? And that is something that has been previously very expensive. It's going to become less expensive. And less expensive, again, I want to emphasize, doesn't mean that people who handle translations will make less. It just means that it will be less expensive to produce that content. And let me see if I can explain myself. So we're talking about more languages, more content, more audiences, and versioning. Versioning is very important, right? This is something that's already happening. Currently, because it's so expensive, companies will translate one version of a content. So they'll translate, let's say, English into Brazilian Portuguese. They won't think about, okay, I want to have one version for English into Brazilian Portuguese for 30 to 45-year-olds in the financial market in São Paulo versus Brazilian Portuguese for 20 to 25-year-old surfers in Leblon. So versioning is something that's also going to become more accessible. And versioning is something that takes into account, that requires greater intellectual ability, right? Because you're talking about that hyper tuning with a very particular audience, or getting into a sophisticated marketing skill. And this is where there's a bit of a paradox, and I know that there will be pressure because the unit cost will become lower. It's unavoidable. Like if you have, let's say, someone who's, just as an example, if you're making 20 cents a word and you're working within a framework that's Gen AI, however you measure it, the word cost will be lower for the buyer, but the productivity will become higher. Not just the productivity, but the value add will become higher. So ultimately, the income may become higher. And what I want to emphasize is, as far as the key drivers that will make the income become higher have to do with productivity and value, right? And productivity is very simple to explain. How many words can someone produce a day? Remembering that typing will be basically non-existent. We're talking about editing things here and there. But it's the same thing as an amazing chef, right? An amazing chef isn't doing the cooking. As an amazing chef is tasting the food here and there, adding a little bit of salt, adding a little bit of pepper, throwing some food away that they didn't like. That's what a chef does, right? They're not actually preparing the food, but they're ensuring that the plate that's being served is exactly as they expect. So there's great value in this work. There's great value in being able to work more based on exceptions than on doing the actual grunt work. And as I move on, I will, again, see if anybody has any questions so far.
Yeah, have you explained, I mean, this paradox, like, less, have you explained the paradox of like making less money per word or changing, I mean, like, more productivity, so we're gonna be working more and making less money? Because I don't see it, I mean, like, the way things
Yeah.
work.
So it's a great question. If the value of the work does not get greater, the only way out is more productivity. And I don't like that way out. It's not necessarily a good way out, because that just means that, let's say, instead of translating, just as an example, instead of translating 3,000 words a day, you'll be reading and evaluating 12,000 words a day, right? So that's how, let's say, the output gets greater, right? Just more throughput. But we're talking about another thing, which is the value getting greater. And the value will be greater because of this. Language will be seen as a revenue enabler. This is something that's already happening with large companies. So for a long time, language was just seen as something that had to get done. Let's say I was a large global company and I was selling software maybe in Japan. I just had to translate my support literature. It was expensive, but it had to be done for legal purposes because people had questions and things like that. In the digital world, because everything is measurable through analytics, CTR scores, bounce rates, page ranks, time spent on page, everything, all user behavior is measurable. And we can demonstrate, or companies can demonstrate, how language can create revenue. It's already clear in English, for instance. That's why so many companies do A/B testing of their content in English. They can see, okay, when I write things in a certain way, people click my buy button. When I write things in another way, they don't click my buy button. But when it comes to translations, people rarely get into that level of evaluation. When language becomes a revenue enabler, it is a much more sophisticated trade. Because now, let's say you're not just translating words, you're getting people to perform certain actions based on the desires of that brand. So again, we're talking about upskilling, and that's the second part of answering your question, right? We're talking about getting all of this, and this is something, I had a conversation earlier today, which there are other problems that will have to be addressed, but let's say is there anybody here in this room below 30? Okay. Barely, okay. So people over 30 with experience and with the level of experience that I imagine that everybody in this room has are in actually a pretty good place, because that experience is going to become even more valuable, right? Because it's that experience that's going to allow these little micro-textual editorial decisions to be made, right? And that's the point. When you are a great translator, and I'm sure everybody here is, you can have the ability to make little decisions on language that have a huge impact on a certain word, on a certain style, on a certain tone, because you know the audience, you know the company, you understand the text, and you're already doing it. You're just likely not, sometimes, probably, not necessarily being recognized for that effort. In a world where everything gets measured, it's easier for people to recognize that effort. We have a use case with one of our clients, for instance, that is no longer working through translation agencies. What they have done is they are working through subject matter experts. So the translators have become subject matter experts for them. And because they have this framework enabled, the translators are no longer, that they're working with, they're not paid by word, they're paid by enabling an entire market working. So they're paid much more as marketing strategists than they are paid by as per word translators. Again, I think one thing that I don't want to gloss over, which is your question, is that there will be a period, there is a period right now, in my opinion, of immense economic pressure. Because what you see is, in my opinion, most of this change won't happen in an intelligent way. It happens through economic pressure, and economic pressure is typically pretty stupid and pretty mean. So the way it happens is like executives begin to squeeze down the value chain, and agencies begin to squeeze it down, and translators begin to be squeezed down, and the ask is always, just bring down your prices. That's just the ask. And that's, again, to me, that's a stupid ask, but that is something that's part of a much bigger process that's taking place. And that's part of what I want to That's part of the message that I really want to try to communicate today, is that there is a bigger transformation that's taking place that, in my opinion, can have a very powerful outcome for everybody. So this is part of what I was saying, right? The minutiae of editorial decisions will become more valuable. Grunt work, I made it a point not to use less valuable. Grunt work will become valueless. So, if someone here is proud because they can crank out 7,000 words a day, that's going to be valueless. It will be. I mean, as much as I admire that. If someone here can make 3 changes in a paragraph and make that paragraph read so much better, that will become infinitely valuable. So we're not talking about the number of changes. We're talking about changes that matter. We're talking about connecting with audiences. And this is another thing that's happening. We have large global clients who are getting rid of the idea of language quality and moving into the idea of language engagement, right? Language was taught to us, at least to me, as something, as a matter of right and wrong. Grammar rules, for instance, right? And I was really always very bad at those. But that's how I learned language. And when you start looking at language as a vehicle for getting things done, the whole entire notion of quality changes. Because if your text, for instance, gets me to hit that buy button, gets me to like that brand, gets me to like that post, gets me to do something that is intended for me to do, that is very valuable. And the other thing that's happening is that as language will become better, and it will become better because it's going to become more pervasive, more easy. The baseline is, again, if you take us back 20 years ago, if you didn't have a human who could speak that language and get something translated, it would be literally incomprehensible to anybody else. You needed that human to facilitate that. So even a average translator would at least be doing something. Now we're talking about a world where average is doing nothing that a machine can do. So the key thing is things will already be translated, but they need to be incessantly optimized for specific audiences, for specific outcomes. And that's another thing that's going to happen. The same piece of text is going to be translated again and again and again and again until it reaches desired results. And so we're talking about a world where a lot more content will be translated into a lot more languages and again, because iteration will be possible in a way that it's not today, right? If you think about a print document, for instance, you translate, you print it, you're not going to print a new version 2 weeks after you printed the original. That's going to be crazy, right? In the digital world, you can post the same thing on a daily basis and keep making it a little bit better until you get to the right outcome. So it's likely that we're going to circle through the same content again and again for very specific outcomes, for very specific nuances. So for instance, as we get into situations where we get to hyper-targeting content, that degree of knowing that audience and treating the same content completely differently for different people, that's going to also increase the workload. Any questions again before I move on? Yes?
So you are saying...
Sorry, I didn't give you the microphone, I should have.
So, a couple of questions. Number one is you say the translators will become like a revenue enabler.
Yes.
And it will be measured not by the words, but by the influence. But who is going to measure that? Who is going to qualify that? Who is going to pay them based on the influence that? And the other question is, I vision this as the translators, the proofreader, the editors' roles will be combined into one in the future. So their value will be measured by what? Because actually they are doing more work. Because the machine cannot proofread itself, right? But you need human translators or editors or proofreaders to verify these in order to effect the influence that you're talking about. So actually, but this is against, actually, to me, against the idea of AI. The idea of AI is finally to replace or minimize human, because as you said, 11.7%
will be additive. That means it's approaching perfect translation. And then future translators and interpreters will have the risk of being replaced.
So great points. I think that breaking it down, right? So I think one point is not having a difference between the roles of a translator, proofreader, reviewer. 100%, I agree. I think we're talking about language managers, language optimizers, whatever you call it, language engineers. That's the role, like getting language to the best possible place. I do think, and that's part of the misconception that I want to address, in my opinion, AI isn't about replacing absolutely anybody, because things, and I'll get to this in a bit just to explain, but I can fast forward a bit. So this is answering your question. So language optimization engineering will become a very valuable thing. And language optimization engineering to me is a combination of those roles. Is when you look at the same information as a translator, as a proofreader, as a reviewer, as the end audience. That's language optimization engineering. And this is one of the things that I do agree with you is who is going to pay for this? And I think that is a question that I don't have a good answer for. But I don't think it's the main point, because I think my opinion is the following. So, for instance, in companies that I am seeing shift to this framework, the companies are paying for this. They're happy to do that. The translators are making not just a bit, they're making a lot more money because they're treated as market enablers. The thing is, we're talking about how do you get an entire production chain that was entirely built based on squeezing people to change. That's a whole other problem. That's not a problem of AI. That's a problem of how an entire production chain was built based on the idea of having middle people making money, paying always a little bit or a lot less to the people getting the work. And that's another thing that will go away, because as you get into more of this framework, those middle layers become unnecessary. So it's a lot more simpler for a company to go directly to a translator and ask for your help. Again, what I do want to recognize, and I do understand on the fear and the challenge, is that there is, in this process, it's going to be really rocky. I don't think it's going to be like a smooth transition at all. I just don't think it's a terrible outcome in the end for everybody, but that's my personal opinion, and that's what I see. And it's not based on vision. This is what I'm seeing in actual use cases with these companies. But as far as greater value, right, we're talking about two different paths. One is a subject matter expert, and that has immense value. So maybe you're super skilled as a patent translator in Germany. Great. There's a lot of patents that need verification from a specialist. And maybe it's just going to be verification for legal purposes. Maybe it's going to be verification for regulatory purposes. But there is a path for SMEs. And the other path is being a language wizard. And the language wizard is the language optimization engineer. It's the person who understands how the audiences think. It's the person who can make those little tweaks to language that makes everything become so much more valuable. And also answering your question is, I think this is, again, my opinion, but as you get to a state of greater transparency, like let's say, for instance, you deliver a great translation right now, amazing translation, and that translation, it's a blog, just as an example. And that blog increases the traffic rate of that company performs incredibly well. It's very difficult in the current state of affairs for whoever hired you to recognize that and to be able to compensate you for that. We're moving into a world of greater transparency where maybe you'll be able to even see the results of that blog, and maybe your compensation will be tied to how well the blog performs as well. So I'm not saying that we're there, but I do believe that we have the mechanisms to get closer to that. So we're talking about not being the number of edits, but the impact and how they will be measured. And again, it's already measured, but still not directly correlated as an indicator of translation quality or compensation and pay. But what I want to emphasize is I'm starting from the premise that what everybody does in this room is incredibly valuable. That's my premise. I'm starting from the premise that people don't know how to measure and assess that that value. And I'm also seeing that we're finally getting to a place where we will have the ability to begin to measure that value. Now there's another problem that is what you were saying as well, which is, okay, now who pays for that? And how does that get recognized and monetized? Those are all issues that need to be figured out. But I think that the framework is there for at least something positive to happen, in my opinion. But again, I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions.
You came very close to answering my question, right? I totally get that the humans add value and deliver valuable input, right? But in order to be paid, and even more than today, I'm sure you would have thought, how do you objectively measure the value add from the human?
Yeah. Again, one example is through these indicators. For instance, if it's digital content, how well it performs, how many views it gets, how much time spent on the content, how many reshares, what was the bounce rate. You have so many different analytics on digital content that can be used to be transformed into some form of monetization, right? But that's definitely one of the paths. I think go ahead, Dan.
Do you have any thoughts on how language translators could even get their hands on these indicators? Because the customer will have very little incentive to share KPIs on how valuable a supplier's work is to them, right?
Yeah. Again, great question. I think actually the buyers these days, not only do they don't have the incentives, they don't even have the information. Right now, not having access to information is a problem. I do disagree, though. I think that if I'm the buyer, for instance, and I can see that your translations in Czech are giving me more traffic or less traffic, I do have an incentive to pay you accordingly and to tie your performance to my traffic, because my performance is also being tied to my salary. So I think the incentive is there. I just think there's a lack of information, and that makes things harder.
I cannot wait to say what I'm going to say, because I'm a terminologist, so I've been paid, and terminology consultant and trainer, so I've been paid by hour for years. Every time I come to the ATA, there's this, oh, should we go to an hourly rate? This is all I hear here. You have your tool sets, your skills. Here is what it translates into for the buyer. Figure out what you're worth per hour at a minimum, quickly, and start thinking collectively what you can do. Of course, there are many of the things that you were been telling Gabriel with, I'm going to measure the output and the value for the company more and more. So there's lots that will still change. But I think if you think of yourselves more as not the production, the Fabrik in German, the production facility of producing sentences, but of adding value to a company, and you know what you want to make, put that out there and see what happens. I'm sure you will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a kind of a different question, but I have a daughter who wants to get into this field. And so is there an advantage to also studying marketing on top of language when you talk about optimization? There's a lot of marketing language here, content. So we're looking for, how do you use language to get attention? And how do you translate language to get attention?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. And I think that's part of the problem, at least that's been mapped out, not just in translation, but so many fields. Because as expertise gets more and more valued, and that's the only thing that carries value, what happens to the people that are just beginning in a field? And that's a problem. And I don't think it has a great answer, because again, if you look back, at least if I look back, 20 years ago, I didn't have the expertise I do now, and I wouldn't be able to add the value that I do now. So I don't have a good answer to that.
Thank you. I could have made this point later on, but I think it's a good point to make now. It sounds to me that what we're facing as a profession is not a technical problem. It's a business problem. Mm-hmm. It really is. that's just my take on it. I teach business negotiation courses, for freelancers, and so I obviously have my own dog in this fight, but we are not going to get what we deserve automatically. We will only get what we negotiate for, right? So even if our value goes up, if we don't have transparency, we don't see the data, we don't see what our translation is really, what the growth and the sales that it's driving, we're not going to see a cent of that unless we learn to negotiate for it. I mean, is that something you can agree with?
Oh yeah. No, 100%. And I think that it's overall, there are many layers of this problem, right? And again, I don't have great answers. I don't. But I do have an outlook. And the outlook is, from a technical perspective, there will be immense value in what everybody does here. That's the key thing, right? Is we're not talking about getting rid of value. We're talking about enhancing value. And then that opens the door to questions like that. How do we negotiate for that? How do we get paid fairly for that? I don't have great questions in that part. I'm not an expert in that. I am an expert in building systems that make the most out of human knowledge. That's the only thing I know about. And I know that when we talk about economic impact, there's a ton of other questions. Yes, please.
What will become of those of us who do not translate in the cause of business? What will become of those of us who translate in the cause of justice, in the cause of improving human health? What will become of those of us who have been taking blocks of wood or blocks of stone and making works of art, and now will be reduced to correcting innumerable tilts of eyebrows so that people will think that these tool and die factory produced things look cute? What will become of those of us who have been trying to make the world a better place through our efforts and are being reduced to grunt work is valueless?
So I appreciate your point, but I don't see this as a reduction. I personally don't. I see this, for instance, if you're translating in the cause of justice, for instance, and the cause, this is a great thing. I mean, if you translate in the cause of justice, and before that cause could translate into one language, and now it can translate into 100 languages, you're amplifying that cause of justice. If you're already working starting from a greater height, that just means the work is going to get even better. I don't see that as being reduction. Again, to me, reduction means if I am not being recognized for my value, not being recognized for my work, if my work becomes degrading, that's reduction. I'm talking, at least in my opinion, about a paradigm that is actually exciting for me. I mean, I like working with language, and if I get a piece of text that's 80, 90, 95% there, and my job is to make it 100%, 99.9%, I like it. It's exciting. And again, it's a matter of adaptation, right? If you look back, and I think you're hitting on a really important point, we can resist. We can pretend that this is not here. We can pretend that I'm just some crazy person, and that's all. We can do that. I mean, it's totally fine. But it's a matter of what you believe in. And I'm starting from the premise that what I'm saying, at least I believe in. I'm not saying it's true, but I believe in this. And if I believe in this, I also believe that logically, the more I can adapt to this rather than resist this and fight this, the more likely that the outcome will be positive. And that's a very hard thing, right? I completely appreciate your perspective. I understand that this can be something terrible, but just to give you an example, my father is 78 years old, and he's retired, and he was displaced from his job, and he uses our software every day to translate, and he earns his living using what we do, and he's happy for it, and he would be otherwise unemployed, and that's just one example. But the point is, it's not something that, in my opinion, is just going to be good for someone of a specific type of person, social background. This is something that can enable a lot of great things for a lot of people. But we're talking, again, this is just repeating, right? What I was saying, translation will become not a technical thing, but a matter of performance. And this is the key thing, right? When we go from mere vessels of communication to actual owners of outcomes, that's a much more valuable trade. And the question is, who's more valuable, the translators who conveys the message to the king or the translator who conveys the message so that the king signs the treaty? I think it's pretty clear who's the most valuable translator. And I get the problem that right now we don't know if the king is signing the treaty or not. But my point is we'll be able to tell. People will be able to tell. And if the person who's hiring you wants the king to sign the treaty, they'll make sure to compensate you more if the treaty gets signed. Because it's in their interest. I'm not saying that they'll do this from the goodness of their heart. You can look at this from a completely Hobbesian light, where man is nastish, brutish, life is nastish, brutish, and short, and all of that, and terrible human nature. Or it still works. It's in people's best interests to get other agents to perform their outcomes. So, and here again, answering your question, I do believe early adopters have an edge, a huge edge, not a small edge, a huge edge. And going back to that first slide, we're still at the very beginning of something. Still at the very beginning of something. And if you're an early adopter, you have an edge. And just as an example, right? Let's suppose everybody here is still working on traditional systems and tools, maybe using machine translation, maybe not using. If you're working with someone, if someone is competing with you and they have tools that you do not have, they will have an edge over you. They will be able to produce more, they will be able to produce better, they will be able to produce more value. And that's what I want to explain. I think, again, I totally get it. If you hate AI after this talk, and I didn't touch any of you, it's all good. But in my opinion, AI isn't a thing, it's a tool. It's a tool that you can make for much greater use. And now I'm explaining the title. When David meets Goliath, it's actually a misnomer in the sense that Goliath, the AI, is not actually a mean giant. It's a tool. It's actually the slingshot. So if you look at it as a tool and you have the right tools to use it, because again, when most people think about AI, they think about ChatGPT or something like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ability to communicate with language in a much more nuanced way than ever before was possible. I'm talking about the capability that we'll have to interact with machines in an uncanny kind of way. And my point of view is that skills that have been latent and buried will resurface stronger than ever. Skills like empathy, like emotional resonance, like critical literary theory, like discourse analysis, like marketing, like connection to current linguistic trends, like appreciation for different communication styles. These are things that nobody gives a shit if I know critical literary theory. Seriously. This will become something important. It will. And a lot of you have studied this, maybe 20, 30 years ago, just like I did. But it will have immense value because those are the tools that are going to allow you to deconstruct text and be like, maybe for this sentence, actually, if we take it in this direction,
this is what we do now. We already do this now.
Yes.
To add value, this is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Yep. This is what all people here are doing. This is translation. There is no difference compared to the past and the future you are predicting.
I disagree. I think that yes, you are doing that now in your head. Absolutely, everybody here is doing that. I agree.
Not only in my head.
Okay, but you're delivering that. Whether or not you're being paid for that, that's the part where I don't think so. In the end, you get paid per word or per hour or however, but that appreciation for this stuff doesn't get factored in. That's my opinion.
The client doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm what you said and kind of contradict what you said. I'm one of those gray-haired, 25 years experienced translators who for 15, 20 years have been squeezed by agencies because we're paid by the word. It's getting lower and lower. But recently I've noticed that I've been prepared more and more for editing or even copywriting, where I do transcreation. And I've had direct clients looking for me, finding me, because all they have in their experience is very literal, mass-produced translations, and they have found out exactly what you said. They value quality, and when I quote them something and I quote a price that's double what an agency may pay me, they have no problem paying it because they see the value and they appreciate it. It is a business issue. We have to learn to sell what we are worth.
But do they pay you as editor rate or as a translator rate?
It depends on what it is. It could be either. But usually, like Gabriel says, it moves more and more to doing transcription and copy editing, where let me just add to this. I also have a degree, I have a master's degree in English. I've learned linguistic deconstruction, like you say, which hasn't been appreciated traditionally, but now that these skills become more and more valuable, I can, from editing 10 years, there are simple little mistakes in a translation that now jump at me that I may not have found in the beginning. But now I see them easily, and like Gabriel says, you change one little word, you change something from passive voice to active voice that the beginner may not realize is a good thing, but you spot it right away, and we have to learn to sell that as a value.
Thank you. I love that. Let's see. I don't know exact order, but we'll try to keep it brief so we can reach everybody.
So I agree also, just to echo Gabriel. I've been also in the industry 20, 25 years. I have a master's degree in translation studies. And I think that in my experience now, the value and clients find me, I'm a freelancer too. Clients find me everywhere. I'm working now as a long-term contract with Scholastics for kids, in the educational solution. And the value that we give, like Gabriel was saying, like those who, embrace it, if you want to use that word, will have an edge. And that has been my experience. My tools, they're not replacing me. I'm still present, very present with them. But like he was saying, I find things that maybe before would have not find. For example, I remember that I was in grad school when Carlos was, out. We struggled to adapt it in a sense. So many changes, and I'm actually very, very hopeful for the future. We just been in this industry for many, many years. I'm actually very hopeful because it's a tool. It's a tool. And the technology is there. We cannot do anything, in a sense about it. And my business is being as more stable now than it has been in many, many years. And I've been in-house translator and freelancer, so.
Thank you. Please.
I wanted to say, it seems to me that it's, for the translators, it's a fear factor, the Gen AI, but it's also maybe a mindset issue that stands in our way, where we feel like editing something is of lesser, it's less respected than being a translator. The editor is less respected than an editor, and I feel like that's also an issue that a lot of people struggle with, and I think we have to come to terms with that. That's probably the direction we're headed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I didn't emphasize that enough, but I definitely, at least in my perspective, editing is of much more value than translating, in my opinion. But please, actually, did you speak already? Okay.
I just wanted to say something very briefly. Like before, we were translating with typewriters, and when the computer started, we were so reluctant because we wanted our typewriters. And then when we adopted the computer, oh, machine translation, no, I cannot do that. And then we adopted Trados, and we adopted so we don't have to translate every the, every a, we don't have to translate every, it's like a chef. You don't have to prep anymore. The prep done if the prep work is done, you just have to taste and see if that is a good product.
Yeah. So, I think we can have one more.
Thank you. Gabriel, I think you said you work for Gania Company? Is that the Montreal company?
No.
What is Gania?
Bureau Works? Oh, that's our company. So
Okay.
my company.
Okay, so I misheard that then. Okay, sorry.
No
I
worries.
was gonna ask you something about that.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
I guess this wasn't a question. We still have one left. Yeah, I'm very interested in what everything you said. I'm just thinking of how it applies to my own field where I do a lot of technical translation, boring manuals, and it seems that a lot of your presentation really rested on translation being a marketing tool. There's lots of us who do a lot of different translations that are not for marketing purposes. Whether it's legal, it's contract, it's medical, it's research papers, it's in my case manuals. So I still understood a lot because I feel it resonates with what you said, that I don't spend most of my time generating copy. I spend most of my time researching and establishing terminology. In that sense, I was a very early adopter of Trados, because it felt like it saved my life. Early adopter, I agree with you, it put me on the right track. I was always ahead of most of my colleagues in being able to be more efficient, cleaner, and higher quality because more consistency. So in a way, I was talking to people, the different exhibitors, and I feel that at this point, AI is not going to give me an edge on anything because what I'm looking for, the next step up in the tool, AI right now, Gen AI is not enough offering me in a way that my DeepL subscription has been doing just fine and it's not improving on it. So rather than being afraid of it, at this point I'm like, well, they still need to be doing some work on it. So turning that into an even better tool that will make me, the boss, the translator, more efficient in my work and more able to focus on what really matters, which is my expertise and the subject matter experts, so again, and everyone said it, Trados or machine translation memories and Trados, like when they appeared, it was a lot of fear. I feel like we're in this 20-year cycle. Okay, well now we're back to that, and 20 years from now there will be another technology that we'll all be afraid of. Although I'll be retired by then, but so that's my comment.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's a great comment. And maybe I did focus a lot on the marketing value. And I know that we're at time, I want to end, but just to stress one point. So the subject matter expertise has immense value. And the other thing, even for content that's not marketing, like let's say a manual, because we're talking about things that are going to be multimodal. So multimodal means you're going to go from different genres of modality seamlessly. So you're going to go from, let's say, that technical manual that you built, that's going to become a video. That video, that's going to become a blog. That blog, that's going to become a post. And things, because content will be repurposed, the accuracy of that initial content is actually going to become even more important than it was these days, because it's going to become training material for something further. That's going to become training material for something further. We're going to be in those stages. The one thing that, if I heard correctly, you said, that AI isn't, let's say, better than DeepL or something like that. Yeah, for your purposes. That's where I disagree completely. Because, again, the definition of AI, right? Is AI ChatGPT? I'm not describing AI as ChatGPT. I'm describing AI as working within a framework that allows these micro interactions that are built specifically to enhance not just higher productivity, but higher insights over the work that's being produced. But I will wrap up and then I have one last final question.
Thank you. So I have a question. So nowadays we have so many AI. So when you design a AI system, do you have a quality check to make sure that they meet specific requirement? Or any company can create the AI, but do we have any standard to see, what's AI that we can use as a tool for the future? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, our personal perspective is that the standard is the human. So that's the standard. And that's why we go back to that first slide on the edit distance. That's what shows how bad or how good the AI is. If you're changing a lot, it's bad. If you're changing very little, it's good. It's a very simple way of looking at it. But I personally am never looking at AI as a replacer. I'm looking at it as a tool. And because we're at time, I just want to kind of aggregate the thoughts. And again, I really appreciate everybody's comments. I really appreciate the sentiments. I just want to echo, I really think what everybody does here is amazing, of immense value. What I heard today, which is super important for us to recognize, is that there are very strong and complex economic implications behind all of this, all of I'm saying. These strong economic implications, in my opinion, have not to do with AI, they have to do with shitty, poorly applied capitalism. That's the problem. It's not AI. That's my opinion. AI becomes another tool for shitty capitalism to press people to do more work for less. That's the logic that to me is faulty. The AI, not AI, that logic is gonna prevail no matter what. And I think, yes, what everybody said, whether it's organizing, whether it's dialoguing, whether it's finding ways to prove that value, absolutely. But what if anybody takes home a single thing from today, what I really want to get across is that AI in and of itself is not an evil monster that is out to get us. It's actually an amazing tool if used properly within the correct frameworks, right? And if used properly within the correct frameworks, it will give you a huge edge. It will give you a huge edge. And if you look for that edge earlier, it's actually going to be even bigger. So again, I don't have all the answers. I'm happy to continue this conversation. We have a booth. Please look for me if you'd like to continue to talk, if you'd like to call me names, all good. I'm really here. I'm really here just because this is what I believe in. I believe in the possibility of a future that looks a little bit better than today, and I'm going to work for it. And whether I fail miserably, that's fine. But that's what I believe in, and I really thank everybody for your time, for your patience. Thank you.